We'll start this off. So I'm joined by our supervisors, Chris Kellstrom and Patrick Jones. I want to just start off with what happened in the Board of Supervisors this Tuesday. It's drawn some national attention now on these Dominion voting machines. So walk me through the vote.
You mean this is not normal?
This is, it's unprecedented.
Well, I was hoping that every meeting would be like this, and so far we're off to a pretty good start. And no, this has been on my mind for quite some time, and this Dominion voting machine contract came up prior. I didn't support it, and I voted no on it, but it did pass. So the last time this contract did come up, I was on the board, and it moved forward. And since then, I've really been diving in and looking into problems associated with electronic voting machines, and specifically with Dominion. And the contracts, the dollar amounts, who's getting it, all these things. None of which, if you Google, will you find any information to that effect.
I have tried that. It's really difficult to
you
find.
You won't find it. And so the mainstream media has clearly chosen to look the other way. And really, when you look at the big picture, what are they so afraid of from uncovering this form of corruption, which is outside interference into election integrity and in election machines? And the reason why is because once that's been determined, which I truly believe is the case, and I think most Americans, the majority of Americans feel that same way, then there is a whole bunch of people that shouldn't be in office, going all the way up to the top, from the bottom to small counties like us, all the way to the presidency of the United States. And that scares a lot of people, and that scares the mainstream media to be able to take corrective action and reverse things that was not the will of the voters. And I think they're scared of it. And I've seen that locally, my 8 years on Reading City Council, trying to work with the grand jury. Nobody wants to have a bad name. And I think back to Bell, California, where they uncovered about $22 million worth of corruption. And they had no newspaper to report what was happening. Things were happening that were corrupt, and finally that came out, and several people went to jail. And Bell, California is now forever known for corruption. But yet it was only $22 million, a small town. And so learning from those kinds of things, nobody really wants to get to the truth. That's why our grand jury never has really accomplished a whole much. They just slap someone on the hand, they make a recommendation, the city or the county responds yes or no, nothing ever happens. I think this time, though, there's too much pressure, too much public pressure. People from both sides. I had a call yesterday from an organization out of the Bay Area, very liberal, and they said you did the right thing with eliminating this contract.
Really?
And they were, they're sending me a whole bunch of stuff of what they've uncovered. And so this reaches across party lines. Everybody wants free and fair elections. We just want it to be, fair. And I've ran many campaigns. I've lost more than I've won. And those, when I lost, I felt that, I was beat. Someone worked harder. Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I feel like, and we're talking about small towns, and Shasta County is a smaller area, at least in California. It's a large county for Northern California, but people during the elections here have at least felt that they're fair, and the results have shown that people here have a voice. We have a successful recall in which we got you out of this, and I mean, they're also the critics, across what we're seeing in the news is, Trump won here, so why is this conservative county so worried? But you're trying to set a precedent.
Well, so for, we've been paying attention for the last several years, and there's a lot of us here in this county and elsewhere that have been paying attention to the specifics and to the detail of exactly what's happening in election offices, and we're starting to see some trends. For me, when I ran for Shasta County Board of Supervisors, started in 2019, and then it went over into 2020, I knew I could win that race. I knew my abilities. I knew how much work I would put into it. I knew my opponent, and I knew I would win that race without a doubt. And I was prepared, and I was hungry to do the work, and I did the work. My only fear at that time was that I knew I would win that race as long as it was fair. And it turned out that it was, and I won by the margin that I almost predicted to the point. And we moved forward into the 2022 primary, and we started seeing a lot of things that did not make sense, where people were ready, they were hungry, they had good campaigns, they did the work, they worked harder, and the result wasn't there. What I've been seeing a trend in is in the district races in Shasta County, most of those have gone about the way that they should have. I haven't seen the fraud in the district races. In the county-wide races, that's a completely different story. And when you see something that is of a concern that doesn't look right, you don't just push it off and say, well, let's just forget about that. You investigate that, you research it, you do an audit, and you find out the truth to restore public's trust. And that's what's happening. Even our current ROV, Ms. Allen, would agree that the trust with the public is at an all-time low across
We did
this
discuss
nation.
that. Mm-hmm.
And she knows that. And she's lost control of the trust. And she has not had the things, she has not done things to restore the trust. And it's slipping away, and it's getting further and further away. And she's not much different than any other register of voters.
Well, I would argue things were actually done this last election that compromised that trust even more. Not anything that I think was necessarily intentional, but I mean, we did a report on it even election night. It just, there's added things that just don't help when it comes to this widespread speculation when we have our elections.
Absolutely. And what happened this last Tuesday, we have a couple different issues here. First, the issue that was on the agenda was the Dominion voting machine contract. Do we continue to use it or not? That is a separate, separate issue from the Register of Voters herself. It was getting a little bit confused as to what was on the agenda, but we did eliminate the contract. The vote was 3-2. Myself, Supervisor Kellstrom, and Supervisor Kreider supported to eliminate the contract after the March 7th special election for the Shasta Lake City special election, because there was that the ROV made a mistake, and we're having to spend $80,000 to make that back again, make that whole. So we have to do a special election come March 7th. As soon as that election is complete, the contract with Dominion will end. Now, the beauty of that is it now gives us several months to start thinking about what we want to do from here. And so there are 2 other certified machines, or do we go to hand counting? What is legal? What are we authorized to do? And we're going to explore all those issues to see. That's the next step. And we have a couple months now before we need to make a decision. We do have a primary election in 2024 coming up, a March primary. That gives us a full year to be able to get ready for whatever system that we happen to choose from the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. So this week, for me, was a great week in that by getting rid of that contract, and we are the first in Shasta, first in the state of California, first of 40 to get rid of this contract. And so it is getting some attention up and down the state and across the country. And I'm hopeful that other counties will start looking deep into their contracts if they have Dominion and do the same. And I think you'll see others.
Have you talked to other counties that use these other 2 companies? I mean, what if they're still electronic machines, what would be different about them?
For me, I have not contacted any other cities or counties. I've just been paying close attention to what's been happening here in Shasta County. And some have said, well, shouldn't you decide what you want to do first before you get rid of this contract? And my response, and I've talked to several experts about that and the timing of that, and they all agreed this company and this corporation has a tremendous amount of flaws, and get rid of it. And I equate it to like an abusive relationship. Do you go find a new relationship first before you get out of the abusive one? Get out of the abusive relationship and go find another relationship thereafter. And that's what we did this week.
Mm-hmm. And what if none of these companies are up to par with what you're wanting? You're thinking about hand counting?
Well, and I was just talking about this with Supervisor Kellstrom earlier, that what it appears to me is that the state has certified, if you're going to do electronic tabulation, 3 machines. Dominion is one of those. I'm not 100% certain. So if you're going to do electronic tabulation, you have to use one of these 3 machines. But I don't think it mandates that we have to do electronic tabulation, which means hand count. And keep in mind, in Shasta County, we're a small county, and the population in the last 20 years has only grown by 10,000. And there were, 130 years of our existence here in this county where we counted them by hand. And I still think we're able to do that. I think that will be a huge step in the right direction to restore trust with the voters. And it's not that fraud couldn't happen there either, but it's only as good as the people around it, operating it, observing, and so we have to do better. And clearly, electronic machines, you could stand right next to a Dominion voting machine. We have 3 of them at the county that I know of, ICE 1, 2, and 3. You can stand right next to them. I have no idea if there's any fraud going on. I cannot see what's happening inside those machines. And in fact, I think they're unconstitutional. I have a right to observe my vote being cast. And with an electronic machine, I don't think you can do it.
Well, Supervisor Kellstrom, what are your thoughts?
I know. I'm thinking I should have went to breakfast before I came here. I seem to would have had time, but my thoughts are, where there's smoke, there's fire, and we've got, there's a lot of questions on these machines. I was at a couple different talks from different election integrity guys that came to Reading, and listening to them, even if 10% of what they say is true, it's very frightening. And the fact that there's like this veil of secrecy, it's, hey, we have these questions. Okay, well, then you're crazy. You're a crazy conspiracy hat wearing, tinfoil guy. Mm-hmm. You're nuts. Well, okay, let's look into this. I got some questions now, and I brought out on the board, when we were making this vote, and I brought out there that I know I won my race. I know I won my race. I worked my tail off. I know that I won my race. I'm very confident that because of the work I put in and the amount of money that I raised and spent and everything else, that I fair and square won that race. If there was anybody that questioned that, whether I won it or not, I'd be the first guy out there to say, listen, let's go dig through the ballots. Let's go do an audit. Let's go do whatever we can. Let's go canvass door to door. Let's go. I want to prove to you, how dare you question my integrity, or how dare you question that I won this race or not? I will do anything in my power to prove to you that I won this race. So let's go poll some different people that voted. Let's go canvass. Let's go do whatever. I would be the first one out there. And there were some questions in the 2022 primary, and it was, we don't want to look at it. We don't want to listen to you. You're crazy. You're wearing a tinfoil hat. And it's like nobody wanted to, again, hey, there's a little bit of smoke here. Let's prove that it's, whatever. It's water vapor. Let's prove there's no fire there. No, it was like, we're not even going to look into it. You guys are nuts. We're not going to listen to you. We're not going to look at any of your data. We're not going to look at anything. And quite frankly, I think I was told it was illegal to do an audit and look at the voting records, or look into the voting. So that's my whole thing. It's like, if you guys don't want to be straightforward and truthful, then I think that smoke might actually be some smoke there. So Dominion voting machines do not have a good reputation. If we don't have to be a part of them, then, if you won't let us look into this data and you won't listen to some of the counter experts, everybody wanted us to listen to their expert. And I watched that. I watched it online, but I watched the other 2 guys live also. So I try to watch both sides. I try to listen to all the information I can possibly listen to. Nobody was at the other 2 fellas that came, Seth Ketchel and Dr. Frank. No, none of these people that are denying that this is going on, none of them were there to listen to what they had to say. They just brought their own expert in and say, oh, this is the expert. Those guys are crazy. This is the expert. Okay, well, shouldn't you listen to both sides? And if you do have questions after listening to one of these guys, shouldn't you want to investigate and look into it?
And I'm all about the conversation. I think the questioning, and if you're not happy with it, and if you're getting support from your constituents who also aren't happy with it, then let's do it. I did feel in multiple elections where news people that have that advantage, that are, right in the heart of these cities, are not asking the questions. I think it's difficult for, even me, I'm out there trying to ask the questions, but we're a smaller area, right? I don't know what's happening in Sacramento necessarily, other than what we're getting from the news stations there. And that's kind of how it works, right? We all share information.
And a lot of that information comes from, say, the registrar of voters. So they'll give you the information. This is what happened. Okay, well, can you investigate further into that? And when I mentioned it on the board floor the other day, oh no, that'd be illegal. Oh, to look into it a little more would be illegal. Okay, so.
So I have to ask you on that too. So Kathy Darlene Allen, our registrar, she had said that the conversation wasn't had with her before this decision was made, and she would have liked to have had that, or at least have had her expert opinion inserted in there. Did you guys have a conversation with her? And if not, why didn't you?
Yeah, so I put this on the agenda, and it came out, Thursday, so she was aware of it, most likely even prior to that. So she was aware of it, and she's free to come to the board and speak to it if she so wanted. And she did show up to the board. I didn't call her. And the reason why is because this is, again, a separate issue from the ROV. It is a contract that the Board of Supervisors either will or won't approve. And up to that point, they did approve this contract with Dominion. And now if a representative from Dominion wanted to show up and try to convince us, that would have been nice. But I don't think Mr. Bennett wanted to show up on this one. And he has been here before. He's tried to defend Dominion. I found him to be aggressive and argumentative, and not a whole lot of questions being answered. The bottom line.
Well, and they're making money off of this from the counties who contract them, right? So, it's just like any business. Of course, they're going to say that their product is good.
Correct. And, and we saw Mr. Bennett, he's the representative for Dominion. He also gave money to Supervisor Leonard Modi to try to keep him in office, who also supported the Dominion contract. So we saw stuff like that. We've seen stuff like this up and down the state. The bottom line is this was a $2.2 million contract, and if I'm going to accept it, and I voted no on it the last time that it came up, but it did pass, you have to prove to me that it's not going to be, compromised. And no one has come forward to show me that. They said, no, that's not how it works. You have to go
just
prove
that that's
the fraud.
crazy.
Right. She has to prove it. If she's going to use it, and if she's going to defend, if our ROV is going to defend Dominion, you're going to have to prove to me that it's a fair system that cannot be compromised. And that's an argument I'm going to win, because they have failed to do so. And I'm not going to renew that contract unless you can prove it to me. And that's really the way I'm going to look at any other electronic voting machine or system. You're going to have to prove to me that this thing cannot be compromised. And because I believe they are. And we've gotten so much contact now, especially after the county has dropped this contract. We've had a lot of other people now starting to get a hold of us, besides Dr. Frank, besides Seth Ketchel, besides Jovan Pulitzer Hutton. All these guys have watched Shasta County, and they say you absolutely have fraud here.
What are the reasons that they give you there?
So they all are experts at doing things a little bit differently. Like Jovan, for example, he's been working heavy in Arizona. And by the way, our ROV on taxpayers' dime went to Arizona recently. She's never said what she was doing in Arizona on the taxpayers' dime. I have no idea. But obviously, there's been a lot of issues going on in one or two particular counties.
Arizona is very interesting for what has been happening. And it's something that I've only been able to get information by following independent journalists who are there, where I really feel like I'm getting some meat that something's going on.
My mother moved to Maricopa County, and I said, you understand that's one of the most corrupt counties in the entire nation. I mean, that's right there with Cook and Broward. I mean, this is like, yeah. So, and then we saw what happened in Maricopa County. So,
and Jovan... what Jovan did there, just for starters, just a few things that he did. He has he's created computer programs to take a look at the ballots themselves, the paper, the material. He's found that thousands and thousands weren't our paper. And so they couldn't possibly be legal ballots if they're not on our paper. He has a program to take a look at the folds. If they're mailed out and folded up in an envelope and come back, they should have a fold. He's found 100,000 that didn't have folds. He has a computer. So he's had.
How come this stuff isn't just put out more? I mean,
because
it's
they're
just
crazy. If you put it
not
out there, you're
transparent.
crazy.
They're not credible.
Yes, you're wearing a tinfoil
Because I
hat.
have to say, I thought it was. I was actually pretty shocked, and I don't even know if what I did, if I should have done that. To me, so when I went to turn in my ballot on election night for this last election, I turned in my ballot, I turned in my friend's ballot, and I turned in her son's ballot.
Perfectly legal in the state of California.
Right, which is perfectly legal. But I walked in, right, and I voted in person. I mean, they were filled out beforehand and signed and dropped them off. But I'm thinking I could have just dropped off a stack of ballots, which I essentially did, and it wasn't questioned. It was,
back
and
in,
I know that that's legal, but I just thought, wow, I can't believe I was able to do that.
back before they legalized ballot harvesting, which is what that is. I mean, it's, and obviously you're not, you're not a mule. I'm not saying you're a mule.
No, but that's what
exactly. And that's what's ostensibly they made it legal for, is a situation just like that. Your friend couldn't get there, so you took their ballots, and there was no harm, there was no foul, there was no, nothing wrong with that. But back in the day, you would have had to basically sign your name. Your friend would have had to sign a name. I mean, it was almost like an affidavit.
Yeah.
I don't think you had to have it notarized, but it was that big of a deal for you to take that ballot in there. And then they had to check your signature. They had to check her signature.
Correct. You have to present your ID.
Right.
And
It was a huge deal. You couldn't just grab your neighbor's ballot and drop it down there without going through extra steps. Now you can just go and grab your name. Now, so for what you
Which,
did,
and I could have easily put it in the mail, right? And
absolutely. And I was getting my ex-wife's ballot at my house for quite some time now. I know that if I were to fill that out and send it in, I'd be the first guy that would get tagged and be wrong, and I would be the example. Of course, I never did that, and I wouldn't do that. But I mean, but there's questions of, there's some homes out there that, Alzheimer's homes, for instance. Let's just throw that out there, that the people are there, they don't really know what's going on, but they can all be registered voters. Okay, well, you can now legally take all their ballots down and drop them in the drop box. Did they know what they were filling out? Did they have any idea? Did you fill it out for them? All that stuff can happen, and there's really no proof of that. And then these drop boxes are the same thing. I mean, you can go in there with a backpack full of ballots and drop them in there. And, once again, we've had I'm personal friends with some people that have, after they went to see Dr. Frank, and he basically just goes on data. It's just all raw numbers. These are the numbers. This stands out. This doesn't look right. Yada yada yada. So a couple of them became activists, I guess you could say. They wanted to get to the bottom of this. So they're going out, and they're finding vacant fields with 5 voters registered to that vacant field. They went into one machine shop here locally, and there was 5 registered voters that were registered to vote at that machine shop. And the owner's like, I'm not even registered to vote here myself. I'm at home. And they said, well, all 5 of these people registered here, and all 5 of them voted. There was one famous.
I've had people tell me too that they voted when they hadn't yet, or they got multiple ballots. I've had text messages of people here in Shasta County who have sent me that. And granted, there's always, I feel like there's room for error, right? And that's why we're supposed to have the integrity in our elections, and those are supposed to be checked and verified. But
now, if I was register of voters and somebody brought this stuff to me, I'd immediately want to go see this machine shop. I'd immediately want to go see this vacant field. I'd immediately want to pull those ballots, see who sent them in, when they were sent, who they were mailed to. I would want to get to the bottom of that. I would not want to think that my, elections in Shasta County could possibly be compromised. But instead, these people are crazy. In fact, we're going to go put out a press release that they're out harassing voters. It's not what they were doing.
Which we did follow up on that too. And that's actually the quote. So I'm going to read, this is quoted actually in SF Gate, that, and it speaks to the aggressive behavior. It says, so that Kathy Darlene Alling had to deal with aggressive individuals impersonating election officials, which is the press release we got. And we reported on it as well here in Reading. But I followed up with that, and there was never any police reports of any kind of threatening violence, nothing that was substantial to where information that I would have to file a police report. So I don't know, we asked for this information. We never really got it. It was just kind of like, well, this is happening. Just believe it. And I think that was another move that kind of derailed people's trust.
And if
again.
I had to guess, I'd say you were probably the only one of the media that tried to follow up on it instead of just reading the press release and going on with, oh, these people are all nuts. You're probably the only one.
And this group, they were just a civic-minded group of people that wanted to go out and do a little canvassing, which is their right in California. They didn't ask people who you voted for. They didn't ask what your party affiliation was. They were simply saying, hey, we have here that there's 5 people registered to vote at this address. Is that correct? We would just like to know. And quickly, by going through several hundred houses and locations, they found a lot of errors, a lot. Hundreds. And
like what?
like
Sorry, I'm curious.
So like having 5 people registered there when there was only 4.
Okay.
Having
somebody named I'm a Plant.
right. And
Yes, we have a
in
registered
Shasta
voter in
County.
Shasta County named I'm a Plant.
and various people not be there's a lot. It's not a residence. And you can put your mailing address down, right? When you look at my ballot, I have my physical address, and then I get my ballot at a different location, a mailing. Now, could somebody get that messed up? That's possible, but that's what these people were doing, was just verifying. And it's kind of what we would expect our ROV to do, but instead, so these people were doing their civic duty to kind of check some of these things that were obviously, when you have 7 people registered at a house, you probably might want to go check that out, right? That's a little unusual, not impossible, but you should check it out. And the response from the ROV was she threatened these people as if they were doing something wrong because she didn't want them to get to the truth. And I firmly believe that. It was very shocking to see. She should have been out there helping them, saying, I'll help you canvass to get to the bottom of these things. And let's clean up some of this stuff. Let's clean up the voter rolls. And this is exactly what Jovan Hutton Pulitzer says, is that the cheating does not occur in one area. You have the goalpost here, and you have a lot of different ways to get past the goalpost. And the Dominion voting machine is one of those systems that helps them get there. And there's other ways in California that are just ripe for corruption. Sending the ballots out so early, having a whole month before, that is just ripe for problems. In the 2022 primary, the first numbers that were on election night, the first numbers that were posted we hear about these 12 candidates, 6 over here and 6 over there. Well, it put 6 candidates all massively up, all across the board, as if they were all the same races.
Like 6,000 votes.
Right. Very
Consistently.
unusual. I've never seen that before. But yet, on election night, when you take a look at the people voting in person, it's all reversed. The other 6 were winning by double-digit numbers. And things like that are clear.
Yeah, we actually, yes, we did see that a lot. Where
Right, and so that needs to be looked at. How come how come the massive difference in that? And these were all separate races. And what we were
I mean,
asking,
I think I feel like stronger, old school conservative people are the ones really that still vote in person.
That's the narrative. That's
Yeah.
true. Now, so we had a candidate, well, we'll just say his name, Eric Jensen was a candidate for district attorney.
Correct.
And he went through the numbers, not only the numbers of the 2022 primary in his own race and everybody else's race, he went through those with a fine-tooth comb, and some of his findings were, amazing. I mean, they were 40% gaps. But then he also went through some of the past races, and for instance, like the 2016, Trump-Hillary. I mean, that could not have been a more polarizing race ever. I mean, that was there was no crossovers. I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. I mean, that was as polarizing as it gets. So if that narrative is true, that race, I mean, it should have been the conservative voters voting the day of at the polling places should have been 100% Trump and or 99%
That
Trump,
is true.
1% Hillary. So the gap there was like 2-3 points. The gap on the 2020
And that didn't fit
primary
the
was
narrative.
like 40 points. I mean, it was huge, and those races were not nearly as polarizing as the 2016. So that is the narrative. The most conservative people vote on election day at the polling places with the machines, and to a certain extent, it's true, but it's 2-3% true. It's not 40% true. I mean, these numbers were off the charts. And again, nobody wants to look at him. He's crazy. He's wearing a tinfoil hat. there's no smoke here. We're not going to look at it. And that's the part that kills me. Again, I want to get to the bottom of everything. If you accuse me of something, I want to prove myself. I want to prove my innocence. I want to prove the system, whatever the situation is. Not, well, you're crazy, I'm not even going to listen to you. It's just, so that part just
Well, the
kills me.
critique too that you guys got, and I know even Supervisor Mary Rickert had said, well, we were all elected with these Dominion machines, so how do you combat that, right?
So there's a couple things. First, for Supervisor Rickert, nobody ran against her. So, she put up over $100,000 in her campaign to scare off any would-be candidates, and no one ran against her. So that's a given for her. But as I said earlier, what we have seen a trend in is we don't see as much problems in the district races. And this is a very good point. This is exactly why we need more investigation. When you look at the 2022 primary, the only two races that went on to November were the two district races, not any of the countywide races. That looks a little unusual. I won my district-wide race. Leonard Modi was recalled in a district race.
Correct.
Tim Garman won in a district race. So how could you get those races being won, but yet none of them in the county had any similar results? You should have seen some difference with the countywide races. Now, if there was no effort put to those countywide races, I would say, hey, you didn't put the effort, you didn't have good candidates, you didn't have good campaigns, you just got beat. And we know when we get beat. I've been beat more than I've won, and I know it every time. I know before the election if I've won or if I've lost because of the effort. You watch your opponent, you know what he's doing, you read their financial reports, you know what you've done, you know what's going to happen. Look at that June 2022 primary, because what happened there should not have happened.
And in that particular race too, there was somebody finally was running against Kathy Darling Allen, and she was asked to recuse herself several times. I mean, that does not look good. When you're in charge of counting your own race, that is like a judge being in charge of his own jury or his own, criminal case. Yeah, I find myself not guilty. I mean, it's going to happen pretty much every time. And a judge would not be allowed to oversee his own criminal case. It is legal in California for her to oversee her own race, which, is ridiculous, but it is. But again, just for integrity reasons, if the roles were reversed and I was in her shoes, I would say, absolutely, I want nothing to do with this. I'm going to step aside. I know I'm going to beat him fair and square, whatever the case may be. I don't want any sign or any I don't want to be looked at like this is not right. I would have, but she was asked several times. She refused to step out of the race.
In the ROV, at every time when there was a crossroads to do what was more on the side of integrity or not, to go on the high road, if you will. She had an opportunity, and she chose to go one direction instead of the other every single time. She was argumentative. She was defensive. Just like, for example, when we asked on the day after, so this would have been, I think, June 8th, I believe it was, the day after the 2022 primary. We had IT guys coming into the back of the RO building about an hour before it opened. And we had an observer there that had asked, hey, can I come in with you? I would just like to see what you're doing. And they said, no, get an attorney. And when we asked our ROV about that, it's like, that doesn't look good. When you got IT guys coming in the very next day with no observers, and why are they there an hour early? No response. We got no response. People had asked, hey, you have a camera out here, can we review the footage of when the ballots are coming in so we can see how the ballot boxes were coming in? It's an alleyway. There's no expectation of privacy. That information was not given over.
So the camera footage, and that's where I will chime in too. I was upset with that. Where do I think something was going on, or these people are doing it intentionally? That's not for me to insert my opinion. How do you prove that these monitors aren't screen recordings or something? I know that, yes, that the video in California, okay, that suffices, is what they said for observing the election process. But I don't know. How can you guarantee me that there's not someone on the side of that camera? Or
again, if we have footage, whatever footage we happen to have, just rolling footage of the ballot, it's kind of important as these vehicles come up and they come out with the box of ballots
Correct.
and they enter into the ROV. It's a public alley. There is no expectation of privacy. That footage can and should be available to the public. In fact, we should stream it live.
Yeah.
But their refusal to give over that information, again, puts a cloud. Whether anything,
I believe Butte County was streaming their election live.
And that's how you do it. You put a spotlight on everything and show off. Good magicians, that's exactly what they do, right? If you're good, you put a spotlight, you put your camera on it, you put it up at a big screen so everybody can see how good this guy is, right? And of course, they're going to be manipulative. That's what they do. But that's not what our ROV did. Every time she had an opportunity to be more transparent, she failed. In fact, she got so defensive on this last election, she told people it's not going to be like the last one, and we're going to put tape here, and you have to stand here, and you're not going to get a look at this. You have to look at the monitor, and we're not going to have it like it was before. Well, that's not helping anything. And ROV wants to blame the board for a lack of trust with elections, and I take high offense to that it's the ROV's job to make sure people feel that we have trust in our election systems, and she has failed. She has failed to do that. And every day that passes, that concern is growing. She's had plenty of opportunities to restore trust with the voters, and at every opportunity, she chose not to go the direction of transparency. She sent out a mailer saying she was transparent. Well, that won't do it. You actually have to do it. You can't send a mailer out saying you're transparent. We've seen plenty of politicians do that. You got to prove it. And she has just been, in my opinion, very disappointing. And we now have a hole to dig out of, because eventually we will restore trust with the voters. We're going to do that. She won't be in office forever. And we're going to make sure that position as a person that is open and transparent and going way over the top. We want everything to be open. We want you to see every step along the way, hide nothing. And that's how you solve the trust.
In fact, you'd think she'd want to release that camera footage, because according to her narrative, the people that were in there were combative, they were, out of their mind, they were all this other stuff. Well, I think that footage would have proved a few things. I mean, first of all, I know a lot of the people that were down there and questioning, hey, in fact, the individual that was on the front porch when the IT guys showed up, he eventually got in there 3 hours later and had asked, is somebody behind that door counting ballots? And they're not counting ballots. And he says, are the ballots behind that door? And well, I can't answer that, yada, yada, yada. I mean, this whole cloud of, we're going to not tell you, we're not going to not let you in there. Well, once the door opened, here's all these people with all these boxes of ballots open. Now, he said he couldn't see them physically counting them at the time, but all the ballots were on the table with the lids off of them with no observers in there. So again, I mean,
it just doesn't help.
It does not help. None of this helps, and she doesn't seem to want to help. I mean, it's instead, you're all nuts, you're crazy, there's nothing going on. I'm going to go ahead and issue a report to the media, and again, you're an exception, but the rest of the media is just going to run with the narrative and whatever comes out of there, and that's fine, and oh yeah, I'm with her, everybody's crazy. Well, let's dig to the bottom of this, let's look into this, and there just seems to be none of that.
Well, and I think the bottom line is I think she's just really out of touch. She's has her core group of people that definitely support her and what she does, but I think she's out of touch with the greater amount of voters throughout Shasta County. And it kind of reminds me of the recall with Leonard Modi. One, they never thought that would happen, and once the signatures were gathered and it was certified to have a recall election, they clearly didn't think that he would be recalled. They highly underestimated the voters, and they saw Leonard Modi's behavior, and they recalled him easily. And it shocked the ROV's office for sure. They were stunned. This was their hero, in fact. And they were out of touch with the public. And that night of, people had asked me, in fact, I was on tape, and they said, do you think he's recalled? I said, he is recalled. There's no question about it, 100%. And I knew that because I have a better sense. When you're on the ground, like a lot of us supervisors, We're out there every day talking to people. There is not a day that goes by that I don't have 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings with people every day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. We're well connected down to the ground level, at a grassroots level. And I think the ROV needs to do the same real quick.
Well, my last question for you guys then, before we wrap up, would be, depending on how this goes, so you're not renewing the Dominion contract, looking at possibly 2 other companies, and then if those don't suffice, the hand counting, is this going to cost the county more? And if it does, are you ready to face that backlash from?
Well, again, I was just talking about this with Supervisor Kellstrom earlier, and that their narrative was, oh, this is going to cost us $1 million, and it's like, absolutely not. In fact, we believe this is going to save us money.
If we don't have to send people to training for a new electronic voting machine, and we don't have to sign a contract with the new electronic voting machine, if none of that happens, then yeah, that's where the $1 million comes from. So the estimate of $1 million and $2 million, whatever the case may be. But what we're seeing now, and I mean, people are still digging into this, but the way it reads is, if you use an electronic voting machine, you have to use one of these 3. Well, if you use one. So what happens if we don't use one? Then we don't have to pick one of those 3. Then we go to hand ballots. Now, most of Europe has now gone back to paper ballots and hand counting. France, for instance, they had an election around our June primaries. 9 million votes were counted, and they had a result the next morning. 9 million hand counts. So,
and we have paper ballots. The difference is that we have electronic tabulation, and I'm pretty sure that we do not have to use electronic tabulation. And again, and the reason why is because our ROV staff has doubled in the last 20 years, but yet the population has only grown by 10,000. We can physically do that, and we did it before a lot faster than what we're doing it today, and it's costing us a lot more today. And it's just typical inefficiencies with government that we see everywhere. And there's a strong sense of urgency with this current Board of Supervisors to quit doing stuff just because you've done it that way in the past. There may be better ways. I think this may be one of them.
And I'm a little confused myself how, so for this last election, 5 minutes after the polls closed, Gavin Newsom won without a question of a doubt. They had the numbers, he won. But then a month later, we're still trying to figure out who won in District 1 in Little Shasta County. So,
well, again, it's just that's the frustration. That's where they fail to retain that trust. And
yep. So yeah, I don't know. I think we should go like France.
Well, this may be the first time I actually agreed with something out of France for a change, but
agreed.
But we've got a couple months.
Pretty good,
that's true, and but we have a couple months to sort this out. We're doing a lot of investigation right now, and I think we're going to be better for it in the end. I'm excited about getting rid of this problem, and and we have to restore trust. And I think this is the first step in doing that, in restoring trust to the voters. And I feel really good about it because I'm not trusting the system either. And I don't like that because I've never had that feeling before. Every time I voted, I felt that everything was fine. That's not the case with this electronic world that we live in. You see every method of electronics being compromised, from your banking to CIA to DOJ. Everything has been compromised. And to say, for all these experts to say that there is no election fraud throughout the country, that's a lie.
And then when you prove there's some election fraud, well, it's just such a minor amount, it doesn't really count. So yeah,
I think that's where it just hasn't been proven substantially. That's not provided to any of us if it is.
Our precincts seem to be very secure. The people that are working at our precincts seem to be doing a fantastic job.
I know some of those people, and they're great. Like they are out there doing their
100%.
patriotic duty.
And back in the day, you voted at the precincts and they tallied up the votes at that precinct and turned them in and got to the registrar's voter's office, and then they took the rest of the votes from the office themselves or mail-in or whatever, the absentee, whatever the case was, but they put them all together. So I wouldn't want anything to change with our precincts. I'd want our precincts to say the same thing, except maybe instead of counting them electronically in the precincts, they count them by hand like they used to do in the precincts and send the information in the registered voter's office. So our precincts are great. And I don't want to, sometimes people get, defensive because they think we're painting with a broad brush, like all of our elections are flawed. I don't believe that, but I do believe that there is some smoke there on the machines, and there's some smoke coming out of the registered voter's office. But I want to make sure I get it on record there. Our precincts are great. They have been doing a fantastic
But while
job.
you guys are in office, you just want to be able to tell people that
Yeah,
they're.
and, you know, the majority of the staff at the ROB are really hardworking people. I mean, we have some really good people in the ROB's office that
Absolutely.
are doing their job. They're doing what they're told to do, and they do that to the best of their ability. And so this is not a reflection of the people that we have in Shasta County. And as I said on the board, you know, you can't look at ICE 1, 2, and 3 and see what's happening, you know, inside. And when you have ICE 1 doing something very different than 2 and 3, those are the kinds of things that need to be looked at, and they're not. And probably never will be to the full extent that we would like. You know, when you do a crime, you see people try to cover their tracks, right? They try to cover their tracks so they don't get caught. And I just have a gut feeling that a lot of that has been going on as well.
And I don't even think, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't, you know, Kathy, I don't think there's a lot of corruption coming from Kathy herself. I really don't. I mean, I think that there's...
I mean, she has dedicated 25 years
Absolutely.
of her time in the county.
And again, and I mean, so I'm not, you know, but I am saying there's some smoke, and if the roles reversed, like I say, if somebody questioned my election and said, you know, hey, how'd you win? We don't think you won. Let's go dig into this. I want to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. And, you know, you mentioned, and it was in the Board of Supervisors, that, you know, well, you guys won your election with Dominion voting machines. No, I won my election with the people of Shasta County that voted for me. Dominion counted the votes, but I won because I was able to convince enough people that I was the right guy for the job. Dominion just played a part in counting those votes. That's all.
You know, and for people being in office a long time, so was Willie Brown. So was Leonard Modi.
True.
You know, so just because you're in office, we have to be up front on everything that we do all the time.
We can't get comfortable.
You can't get comfortable. And right now, when you take a look at this Board of Supervisors over the last 2 years, 4 of the 5 are no longer there. That's the will of the people, and that tells you change is coming.
Well, my guy just retired, so I want to get that on record, too.
I think that's a good ending right there.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Courtney.
Courtney.
Love that. Thank you, guys.